Hello, Internet denizens! Well, I was planning on doing something different right now for this vlog post, but I could not get Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference 2018 out of my mind, so I want to talk about it some more with you. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone. Yes, the Worldwide Developers Conference is over, but I can't get it out of my mind, and there are some things that I didn't really finish talking about during my random brain fart presentation, my RBF, the last video ago. So I wrote it down, and just to make things easy, I'm going to be reading from it occasionally, so, you know, excuse the lack of production values, because I don't have a teleprompter. Maybe, you know, when I get more subscribers, I can afford a teleprompter and look like I'm talking really to you out there. I know that the Worldwide Developers Conference is not about hardware. We know that, but sometimes they do show some hardware. They didn't this time, so I was like meeny, tiny, tinily disappointed. But I wasn't overly disappointed. Let's get real here. Microsoft has not been Apple's adversary for a long time. I think some of us who are old Apple fans, I think we have to come to grips with that if we haven't already. The Apple's adversary is Google, and this Worldwide Developers Conference was the Googling of Apple. If anyone had seen the Google I/O show, it seemed to be very similar to this show, this Worldwide Developers Conference by Apple. So clearly, you know, Microsoft is not Apple's adversary. Google is. You know, for those old farts, as I said, it hasn't been about, you know, Windows and Mac for a long time. It's iOS versus Android. It's Apple services versus Google services. Neither Google with Android or Apple with iOS are trying to innovate at all. All they're doing is copying each other, which quite frankly I'm fine with, because, you know, that's just good for us consumers. But it's not like the good old days between Microsoft Windows and Mac OS. Those were fun days for those of you who remember them. As a longtime Apple fan, and even an Apple II fan, I mean, actually my dad brought an Apple II into the house. He had smuggled it into Canada. He welded it to the bottom of his motorhome. He bought it in Florida, and it was much cheaper, and he smuggled it into Canada. But my dad's dead, so all you government assholes, you can't get my dad. When I was passionate about the Apple II, it was about desktops versus mainframes, and the Mac versus the evil IBM, and then the Mac OS versus even more evil Microsoft Windows. It was a really fun time. We suffered through horrible Apple decisions on hardware because, for whatever reason, because they were the only company that was making computers to compete with the Windows PC, they decided for some reason that they had to have as many SKUs on the Mac side as the PC manufacturers that was using Windows. They had to have the same number. We had to suffer through these horrible 2SI Macs and these Mac LCs. I mean, these were dreadful machines. And then Steve Jobs came back and blew everything up and did that quadrant thingy where they're only going to do 4 different things. Then the Intel versions of the Mac came out, and there was a pretty good period of you know, having reasonable support, a pretty good OS, and actually a very good OS, and exciting OS, and then reasonable hardware. Those were salad days for all us Mac users. So fast forward now, and it's clear from the Worldwide Developers Conference that Mac OS is not Apple's focus. This is not a surprise to anybody. But let's look at some of the Mac OS innovations they brought out at the Worldwide Developers Conference. Dark mode. Oh, there was more. There was Safari favicons. Finally. I was waiting for that. And then there was the father-in-law desktop cleanup mode, which I'm fully in favor of. Yes, there were tools to convert iOS applications to Mac OS. Very exciting and obvious. I mean, yes, as I mentioned in my RBF video, that most of the developers are on iOS. Even though Apple is still making a ton of money from the Macs, it's decreasing. I mean, I think number 1 is from iOS, number 2 is from services, number 3 is now from Mac OS. Based on the Worldwide Developers Conference, it's clear that Apple is out of ideas for the Mac OS. And maybe that's for the better. Really, what we want is a stable OS that works solidly, doesn't crash. I think we'd all be very, very happy with that. And for the most part, that's what Apple has been delivering. I totally agree that things have become way more complex, and Apple is juggling an insane number of balls right now. I mean, compared to the very first Macintosh, which the operating system came on a 400K floppy disk. Plus, it had enough room for 2 applications, Mac Write and Mac Paint. Plus, it had room for a few of the files that you created. I mean, things have come an awful long way. So, let's be realistic about that. Obviously, a small change in iCloud could have monstrous repercussions across the entire Apple ecosystem. I mean, that's a phenomenal burden to live with and to manage. And we have to give Apple credit to kind of that they're making it kind of sort of invisible and seamless. But, my main point in this presentation is the Mac, and notwithstanding the iMac Pro, Apple's hardware offerings are criminal and have been criminal for a long time. I feel sorry for the people who are buying Apple's shit right now. I mean, really, there is no other word for it. And the reason Apple can get away with this is that their brand is so strong. And this is why I think it's criminal. Apple continues to promote itself, I'm going to read this, as a safe haven for people who don't know better. Okay, that's what Apple is about, right? Apple promotes itself as a safe haven for people wanting to use a computer and software who don't know any better. So, clearly, that has been bullshit for an awful long time. And it's an easy fix. Stop brand raping us. Apple, you're abusing your brand. And I get it. The Mac is not your focus anymore. But you did have cutting-edge computers. I had 2 titanium PowerBooks. I had several aluminum MacBook Pros. I mean, these were cutting-edge in their time. And even though their processors might not have been, with what the PCs were doing, they were pretty close. Now, you're 3-4 generations behind on most of your computers. You are abusing your brand. But really, can you live with yourself selling ancient Mac Minis with outrageously outdated processors at the same retail pricing as when you introduced them in 2012? That is what I call brand rape. Yeah, caveat emptor. The people out there should know better, but you are the brand promoting the fact that you are watching our back. This is why it's a deceit, and this is why I call it brand raping. This is what you're doing, Apple. People trust you. And how long is it going to take before it comes back and bites you? I don't know. The MacBook Pros, notwithstanding the fact that they've got the crappy, delicate keyboards that you're being sued for, and the glued and soldered in memory, and the useless touch bar, is a generation or 2 behind in its processor, and yet you are still charging a premium for it. Well, congratulations. Congratulations to you, Apple, that you are able to do that. Why are you still selling a 2015 model? I just bought one because it's a good computer. Yes, it's still overpriced, but I'm not going to buy any of the 2016 MacBook Pros because they're garbage. And it's curious that you're still holding on to this 2015 aluminum MacBook because maybe it has ports on it. People are still buying it for some reason, or you wouldn't keep it in the lineup. It took a lot of guts to take the earphone jack out of the iPhone. But it doesn't take a lot of guts to not delete a 3-year-old SKU. Why are you still selling computers with Core Duo chips and only 4 gig of RAM? I had a friend who bought one of these computers and then later on, wanted to do something with iMovie and then couldn't do it. They had no idea that they bought a computer with insufficient RAM because they were the typical Mac user, the people who are relying on Apple to be an honest broker for them when they buy a computer. That person thought that they were getting a good computer. They bought it now, a Core Duo Mac Mini with only 4 gig of RAM, and it chokes. That is criminal. That is brand rape. Tim Cook, in a recent CNN Money interview, said the following, that Apple's DNA is for Apple to change the world, and change means making the world better. Excuse me, I'm going to get some water. Hold on. Da-dum-da-da. Oh boy. Thank you. So how does this philosophy apply to the present Mac lineup? Okay, the Mac Mini at present MSRP are pure brand rape. Don't buy. The 2015 15-inch MacBook Pro is reasonable, but still has an out-of-date processor and uses an iGPU. But you know what? I would recommend that over any of the 2016 Mac Pro. So I would say that is a qualified buy. The 2016 MacBook Pro Airs are brand rape. Don't buy. The MacBook Airs are super old, but they're still super sexy. And if you get enough RAM in them, then they're okay for a lot of work, writing, note-taking, surfing the internet. Just because they're so sexy, I would say, yeah. And they're not that expensive. They're expensive insofar as the processors and the gear that comes with it, but you know what? I love it. I would say that's a buy. The 21.5-inch iMac, it's not expandable, but if you get it with the 16 gig of RAM, it's got a gorgeous screen. I would say it's an acceptable Macintosh purchase. The 27-inch iMacs, they were kind of updated, and I would put them in as acceptable. The iMac Pro, I actually like these. I've said this in previous videos. Yeah, probably they're over-spec'd, but they seem to be bugger fast, and people seem to be buying them, and I like them. The 2013 Mac Pro Trashintosh is still being sold. I think the only change they made from 2013 was they got rid of the 4-core processor and is now selling the 6-core at the 4-core prices and moved everything down. The 8-core and the 12-core are a little bit cheaper, but not a single one is worth the price. If you can go on eBay and get them used for half the price, then they're probably not a bad computer. They're very powerful, but they have their issues. So right now, I would categorize them as brand rape. So there you go. Apple is no longer the company it once was. Surprise! It should not be a surprise. I mean, yeah, it was fun back in the day when Apple was the underdog, and it was the David against the IBM Goliath and the David against the Micro Squish Goliath. But now Apple is a Goliath, and it is fighting other Goliaths, and it's kind of fun to watch. So, let's not get emotionally invested in Apple, because Apple is not emotionally invested in us, or they wouldn't be brand raping us with half their lineup, or 3/4 of their lineup. Anyway, things are different. The only constant is change. And I will leave you with that. So long, Internet denizens. Till next time. Ooh, you like my fire?